Have you ever met a woman you really like? Everything seemed to be going well. There is chemistry, there is interest, but suddenly she starts to pull away without you knowing why? Have you ever felt that you said something, a simple phrase, maybe a casual answer, or an innocent comment, and it was as if you completely killed the spark? What if I told you there are phrases, yes, specific phrases, that although they seem harmless, act like silent poison in the attraction process? Many men believe that to attract a woman it's enough to have money, a good physique, or an expensive car. But in reality, what comes out of your mouth can play a much more powerful role than anything else. What you say and how you say it can cause a woman to see you as an attractive leader or as someone insecure, needy, and uninteresting. And this is where the real problem lies. We are not aware of the words we use and how those words silently sabotage our chances. The worst part is that no one teaches us this. No one tells us there are phrases we must avoid if we want a woman to feel irresistibly attracted to us. Most men have been conditioned to communicate from need, doubt, or insecurity. We learn to speak from lack, not from abundance, from waiting for approval, not from inner certainty. Phrases like, "Do you mind if I don't want to bother you, but I know I'm a little weird," are so ingrained in our language that we don't even realize what we project when we use them. The problem is not that we say something wrong, but what we communicate behind those words. What those phrases tell a woman, even if we don't say it literally, is, "I don't trust myself, I'm afraid you'll reject me, I'm not good enough for you." And that, on an unconscious level, causes total loss of interest. Because it's not just words, it's energy, perception, emotional impact. The most ironic thing is that many times when a woman pulls away without explanation, it's not because you did something serious. It's because you said something that unknowingly triggered her internal alarm of, "I don't like this. This is not attractive. This doesn't make me feel safe." Did you know a single phrase can activate in a woman's brain the same area that lights up when she feels fear, insecurity, or distrust? And that, on the contrary, another well-spoken phrase, with clear intention, can awaken a flood of attraction she cannot rationalize? Can you imagine what would happen if you knew the exact phrases you must avoid and those you should say so that a woman not only feels attracted but fascinated by you? What if I told you that you don't need to memorize elaborate speeches or pretend to be someone you're not? What if the real power is in transforming your everyday language? What would happen if just by changing 3 phrases, you could create a magnetic effect that makes women seek you, admire you, and want to be near you? Now, do you want to know what those 3 forbidden phrases are and how to replace them so that any woman, when she hears you, feels you are different from all the others? If the answer is yes, stay with me, because what you are about to discover can change your way of relating to women forever. This video is not based on assumptions or empty seduction formulas. What I'm going to share today is backed by neuroscience, perception psychology, and above all, by the unique vision of a man who has dedicated his life to studying how what we say and think deeply impacts our personal and social results. Dr. Mario Alonso Puig. He is not a seduction coach. He is a doctor, surgeon, expert in leadership, communication, and high human performance. He has given talks worldwide explaining how our internal and external language has the power to transform our reality. And within that reality, relationships are also deeply influenced by how we speak, how we express what we feel, and above all, how we perceive ourselves when speaking. Mario reminds us that there are no neutral words. Every word carries emotional charge and intention. And when that intention comes from insecurity, fear, or doubt, no matter how kind or respectful you are, the energy behind your phrases ruins everything. But if you learn to communicate from clarity, from inner certainty, from connection with yourself, then your language becomes magnetic. In this video, I'm going to reveal 3 phrases you've probably said without realizing it and that are sabotaging your chances with women. I'll show you why they fail, how they affect female perception, and most importantly, which phrases you can replace them with to awaken genuine, lasting, and deep interest. And it's not about manipulation or pretending. It's about reclaiming your authenticity, your inner worth, and letting that express itself through how you communicate. As Mario would say, we cannot change the outside world if we don't first transform how we talk to ourselves and others. Before we start, I want to ask you something very simple but important. If you're interested in this topic, If you feel it's time to transform the way you communicate with women and yourself, subscribe right now to the channel and turn on the notification bell. This channel is created to help you grow, not from a mask, but from authenticity. Here we don't talk about empty phrases or shallow seduction techniques. Here we go deep, to the root of what truly makes you attractive as a man. So if you want more content like this, if you'd like to discover how to improve your confidence, your language, your relationships, and your connection with others, this is your place. Subscribe now, because what you're about to learn won't only help you attract a woman, it will help you transform your whole life. There is something most men underestimate, and it has nothing to do with looks, money, or contacts. It's something so everyday that goes unnoticed, but so powerful it can completely define how a woman perceives you, even from the first exchange of words. And that something is language. Not the language you speak, but how you speak it, the words you choose, the tone you use, the energy behind them. When we speak, we don't just make sounds. We project emotions. We reveal beliefs. We show, even if we don't notice, what we really feel about ourselves. And here is where language becomes a double-edged sword. It can elevate you, position you as a confident, attractive, and secure man, or it can sink you into the category of those who generate nothing, those who vanish from memory before finishing a conversation. Why? Because words are not neutral. They never are. Every phrase carries an emotional intention, and that intention is felt, smelled, and breathed. Alonso Puig has explained it clearly. Language is not just a tool to describe reality. It's an instrument to create realities. Words not only express what we think, they also shape how we feel, how others see us, and how we respond to the world around us. When you speak, you draw your identity in front of the other person. And if that identity is built on insecurity, need, or fear, it doesn't matter how calm you seem. Your language will betray you. The human brain, especially a woman's trained emotionally to pick up subtle signals, is an amazing radar. In milliseconds, she has already detected whether your message aligns with yourself or if you're trying to hide something. It's not that she has magical powers. It's that her limbic system, the emotional part of the brain, is designed to register microexpressions, hesitations, contradictions between what you say and what you convey. That's why you can say a kind phrase, even perfectly logical, and still create discomfort. Because discomfort is not created by what you say, but by what you unintentionally communicate. Think about this. If you say, "Sorry to bother you, I just wanted to ask you something quick," you're projecting energy of doubt, of inferiority. You're saying, without saying it, that you don't feel entitled to occupy her attention. You're asking permission to exist in her space. And even if she doesn't analyze it consciously, she feels it. Her body interprets it. Her intuition reacts. And what happens? She disconnects emotionally. She feels she has to take care of you, support you, validate you. And that feeling, believe me, doesn't generate attraction. It generates exhaustion. Now contrast that with someone who says, "You seem interesting, and I wanted to talk with you for a moment." Same intention. Start a conversation, but with a completely different energy. Because the second one is not asking permission. He's not excusing being there. He's not trying to justify his presence. He simply shows up, and that, emotionally, is magnetic. This is where the true value of what Alonso Puig teaches comes in. He doesn't talk about manipulating or acting. He talks about aligning with yourself so that your communication is coherent. Because a coherent person inspires trust. And trust is the foundation of every authentic connection. If you don't trust yourself, how do you expect a woman to trust? If you minimize yourself when you speak, how do you expect her to see you as someone worth building something with? There's a key concept Mario shares again and again. Language not only impacts outwardly, but also shapes your brain inwardly. Every word you say reinforces a neural circuit. If you constantly communicate from doubt, from "I don't want to bother," from "sorry to interrupt you," you are strengthening in your mind a weak, fearful, dependent identity. But if you begin to express yourself from firmness, from clarity, from self-respect, then you are reprogramming your mind. You are building a version of yourself that does not need to hide. This doesn't mean you have to speak loudly, be aggressive, or impose your opinion. It has nothing to do with that. In fact, the most powerful people are often the calmest. Their voice doesn't need volume because their energy already communicates presence. And that presence comes from an inner root. They know who they are, what they want, and what they deserve. That certainty is heard. It is noticed. It is felt. And now here's the interesting part. Most men believe improving their way of speaking means memorizing winning phrases, learning psychological tricks, or using seduction techniques. But none of that works if what you say isn't connected to what you feel. You can say the most seductive phrase in the world, but if your energy transmits anxiety or neediness, you will fail. Instead, you can say something simple, everyday, even banal, but if you say it from inner confidence, you will leave a lasting impression. The power is not in the phrase. It is in who says it and from where it is said. That is why, before teaching you the 3 forbidden phrases you must avoid and the alternatives you can use instead, it is fundamental that you understand this. Your language is not only what you say with your mouth. It is also what you tell yourself mentally, what you allow yourself to feel, and how you occupy your space in the world. And here is something that may make you uncomfortable, but that you need to hear. If you constantly use insecure phrases, if you live asking for permission, if you fear bothering when you speak, it is because inside you there's a part that doesn't feel worthy, a part that still believes it must beg for affection or approval. That part must be seen, understood, and transformed, not with criticism, not with guilt, but with awareness. Because until you heal that within yourself, your way of communicating will continue sabotaging your relationships, no matter how much you try to do everything right. The good news is you can change this, not overnight, but with practice. Start by observing yourself. Listen when you speak. From where do you do it? From abundance or scarcity? From certainty or doubt? From a need to please? Or from the genuine desire to connect? Every word you pronounce is a clue. And if you pay attention, you will begin to notice which phrases make you feel small and which expand you. Mario Alonso Puig reminds us that we are not condemned by our way of speaking. We are conditioned. Yes, but conditioning can be changed. Every day is a new opportunity to choose words more aligned with who you really are, to stop speaking like someone who seeks acceptance and start speaking like someone who already accepts himself. When you make that internal change, everything else will start changing too. You will notice women react differently. More interest, more respect, more connection. Not because you are acting, but because finally you are communicating from your truth. And truth, when expressed with confidence, is irresistible. Now that you understand the real impact your language has, you are ready to discover what those 3 phrases are that you must eliminate from your vocabulary if you want a woman to see you as a different man. Because yes, there are only 3 phrases, but each one contains an emotional trap that can completely extinguish desire and connection. And the best part is that for every forbidden phrase, there's a powerful alternative. A way of speaking that positions you as a clear, confident, and emotionally attractive man. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to speak from who you truly are. And that, my friend, is trained. Let's begin. Let's get straight to the point. The first forbidden phrase you need to remove from your vocabulary is one you've probably said more times than you'd like to admit. It's subtle, seems harmless, and might even sound polite, considerate, gentle. But in reality, it conveys exactly the opposite of what you want to project when you're with a woman you like. This phrase is, "Sorry if I bother you, I just wanted to." Just like that. It can have variations. "I don't know if I'm bothering you with this." "Sorry, maybe it's not the best time." "Excuse me for writing." But the core is the same. A preemptive apology for existing, for being present, for taking up space. And this, even if you don't notice, creates a very specific perception. You're asking permission to interact, as if you don't have the right to do so. You're suggesting your presence might be a burden, an annoyance, something to be tolerated. And what message do you think that sends? Exactly. Insecurity, low self-esteem, need for approval, energy of, "I'm beneath you." And that kind of energy, when a woman detects it, triggers her emotional alarm. Not because she's cruel or shallow, but because biologically, She's designed to seek coherence, confidence, and emotional stability in someone she might bond with. And when a phrase like that appears, coherence disappears. Now imagine this scene. You're about to write to a woman you like. You had a good conversation before, but you don't want to seem intense. So you write something like, "Hi, sorry if I bother you. I just wanted to say hello." It sounds kind, right? But what you're really saying is, "I'm not sure it's worth writing to you. I don't trust that my presence is welcome. I feel I have to justify my intention before you judge me." That emotional burden seeps into how she reads a message, even if she doesn't rationalize it. She feels it and reacts with distance. Maybe she responds coldly, or maybe she doesn't respond. And you, frustrated, wonder what you did wrong. And what you did wrong was start by apologizing for being you. Mario Alonso Puig invites us to pay attention to these internal dynamics. He says language is power because it's the bridge between our identity and our expression in the world. If you apologize every time you take initiative, you're training your mind and those around you to see you as someone who needs permission to act. It's as if you carry an invisible sign that says, "Please approve me." And no truly attractive human carries that sign. Because attraction comes from confidence, not guilt. And if you want a real connection, you need to start speaking from freedom. The funny thing is many men believe apologizing beforehand is a sign of good manners. But it's really a disguise for insecurity. Because one thing is having manners, and quite another is apologizing for existing. The difference lies in the energy you project. A man can be respectful without submitting. He can be considerate without devaluing himself. He can be empathetic without weakening his presence. And there lies the key, not in stopping being kind, but in stopping self-diminishing. So what's the alternative? What could you say instead of "sorry if I bother you"? The answer is simpler than you think. You just need to speak from clarity, not guilt. For example, "Hi, I thought of you and want to say hello." That phrase conveys intention, presence, security. You're not asking for anything. You're not begging for attention. You're simply expressing a desire for connection from freedom. And that changes everything. The difference may seem small in words, but it's huge in energy. In the first case, you're delegating your value to her reaction. In the second, you're affirming your value from the start, regardless of her response. And that's the stance that generates attraction. Because nothing is more magnetic than someone who doesn't excuse their presence. To make it clearer, I'll tell you a true story. Carlos, a 35-year-old man, attended one of the workshops where Mario Alonso Puig's teachings were shared. He said he constantly had problems with women. They always started interested, but soon lost enthusiasm. He didn't understand why, since he considered himself polite, attentive, even thoughtful. But after reviewing many examples of his conversations, the pattern emerged. In almost all his messages, calls, or meetings, he started with apologetic phrases, tones of doubt, and justifying language. "Sorry if this doesn't interest you, but I hope this isn't a bad time to talk. I know you're busy, but..." When he became aware of this, he felt exposed, but also freed, because he realized it wasn't a deep problem with him. It was his way of expressing himself that was creating a distorted image. Over time, and applying small changes to his language, he noticed a profound change. He began speaking with more clarity, writing without preemptive apologies, presenting himself from his center. And the result? Women who used to distance themselves without explanation began responding with more openness, more interest, more reciprocity. This change wasn't magical nor instant, but it was real, and that's what matters. Because what we want to teach you here isn't manipulative phrases or mind games. We want to show you how to reconnect with a way of communicating that represents you, that makes you feel proud of yourself, that positions you as a conscious, free, and valuable man. And now comes something key. It's not about memorizing nice phrases. It's about integrating the emotion behind them. If you just replace the phrase but still feel insecurity inside, sooner or later you'll communicate again, even with different words. That's why Mario insists so much on working on your inner language, because only from there does powerful external language arise. The mind is plastic. It molds, it trains. And every time you choose to express yourself from a place of firmness and not doubt, You reinforce a new mental circuit, a healthier, more focused, more powerful one. I'll give you a practical exercise many of Mario's students use to change this habit. For a week, carry a small notebook or use your phone's notes app. Every time you feel the urge to apologize unnecessarily, when writing, speaking, acting, write it down. Then replace that phrase with another that conveys the same idea, but from security. For example, if you're going to say, "Sorry to bother you with this question," write instead, "I have a question I'd like to share with you." Do this every day, and you'll see how your language transforms. And the most powerful thing, how your way of feeling about yourself transforms. And if you're still not convinced of the impact a single phrase can have on female perception, remember this. For an emotionally intelligent woman, what you say reveals how you think and how you feel. And that's what she analyzes beyond superficial content. She's not looking to be impressed with big words, but for you to convey something that feels authentic, stable, clear, and that is built with conscious practice. Speaking from confidence isn't the same as speaking from arrogance. Confidence is felt in calmness, in how you occupy your space without apologizing, in your ability to express interest without fear or judgment. When you achieve that, when you speak without dragging guilt like an invisible chain, something changes. Not only outside, it changes inside you. You feel expansion. You recognize yourself. You respect yourself. And that, believe me, shows. In summary, eliminate the phrase "sorry if I bother you" from your repertoire. Not because it's offensive, but because it doesn't represent you. Because it does you no justice. Because it doesn't allow you to show yourself as you really are. Replace it with simple, firm, fear-free phrases. Speak from desire, not permission. From clarity, not doubt. From truth, not disguise. When you do this, the change is immediate, because women don't respond to words. They respond to the energy those words carry. And when your energy is one of certainty, freedom, and value, everything transforms. Now that you know the first phrase you must eradicate from your vocabulary and how to replace it, you are one step closer to becoming a magnetic communicator. But this is just the beginning, because the second forbidden phrase is even more common, and its effects can be even more devastating for any emotional connection. Stay tuned, because what you're about to discover might be the missing piece in your personal and relational evolution. There's a second phrase that has settled so deeply in men's everyday language that many don't even realize how destructive it can be in terms of attraction. A phrase that, at first glance, may seem funny, self-critical, or even endearing, but repeated at the wrong moment and with the wrong energy, it can completely extinguish any emotional spark a woman might be feeling. That phrase is, "I'm kind of weird," or any of its variations like, "I'm complicated." The truth is, "I'm kind of damaged," "I'm a little intense," or "I'm not right in the head." Phrases sometimes thrown half jokingly, half seriously, but that always carry the same underlying message. There's something wrong with me, and you probably shouldn't stay close. This type of phrase is, in essence, a premature confession, a statement disguised as honesty, which instead of generating empathy, often raises alarm. Why? Because it's not being used to communicate true vulnerability, but to prevent rejection through self-sabotage. It's an unconscious way of stepping down from the pedestal before someone else does it for you. It's as if you say, "Let me warn you I have flaws so that when you leave, it won't hurt me as much." And in that anticipated emotional defense hides a wound that, far from creating closeness, creates distance. Mario Alonso Puig explains it clearly. When you don't accept your value, what you communicate is a warning, not an invitation. And this translates into language. Instead of opening an emotional door, you close one before anyone has a chance to get truly close. Because you are conditioning that person's perception of you even before they deeply know you. Do you realize the damage that causes? Let's think for a moment about the emotional structure of this phrase. When you say, "I'm kind of weird," maybe you are trying to be authentic, to show your human side, not to seem arrogant. But deep down, what you're transmitting is that you don't feel completely comfortable with yourself, that there are aspects of your personality you consider flawed. And if you feel that way, what do you think the other person will feel? No matter how much they try to see it differently, your energy has already planted a seed of doubt. That phrase, even if said laughingly, carries a silent message. Get ready, because maybe I will disappoint you. The most worrying part is that many times we use these kind of phrases just when someone starts to get interested in us. When a woman begins to open up, when there's a budding connection, when an opportunity for something beautiful is forming, and right there we say, "It's just that I'm complicated." And that phrase falls like a bucket of cold water on the possibility of intimacy. Not because she is fragile, but because you're interfering with your own bonding process. And here's where Mario's work becomes essential. He insists that one of the fundamental steps to improve our relationships is to reconcile with who we are. That includes our quirks, our wounds, our imperfect stories. But reconciliation doesn't mean exposing them as an excuse or using them as a barrier. It means integrating them, embracing them with dignity, and from there relating to others without guilt or negative self-labels. A woman doesn't need you to present yourself as perfect, but she does need to feel that you are at peace with who you are, that you don't carry emotional shame, that you don't need to warn her you are broken, because we all are to some extent. But not all of us use that pain to build an identity. And when we do, when we turn our cracks into verbal justifications, language becomes defensive, heavy, tense. And emotional tension doesn't attract. It tires. So what to do? How to express your nuances, your complexities, your differences, without generating rejection. The key is an approach. Don't speak from the wound. Speak from awareness. Don't present yourself as a problem. Present yourself as a process. Instead of saying, "I'm complicated," you can say something like, "I'm someone who has lived intensely and continues learning every day." That phrase hides nothing. It doesn't deny your experiences, but it frames them in evolution, not stagnation. It speaks from transformation, not negative self-definition. Another example, instead of "I'm kind of weird," you could say, "I have my particularities like everyone, but I've learned to love them." There you're transmitting acceptance, self-love, serenity. You're saying, "I'm not perfect, but I respect myself." And that is tremendously attractive, because it's not about showing yourself as an error-free being. It's about not dragging your mistakes like chains. It's about speaking about yourself with the same compassion you expect from others. Let's remember something Mario often says. What you say about yourself is what you invite others to believe. So ask yourself, how are you speaking about yourself? Are you generating trust or doubt? Are you building connection or anticipating rejection? Are you expressing yourself as a man in progress or as a lost cause? Because the words you use are not innocent. They carry your emotional vibration. And if it's still not clear to you the impact of this kind of phrases, think about how you react when someone tells you, "I'm a disaster with relationships," or "I don't know what I do wrong. I always scare people away." You might feel pity, or maybe curiosity, but attraction, hardly, because that person is already positioning themselves in a place of anticipated failure. And instinctively, you feel you should distance yourself, not out of malice, but for emotional health. Let's return to action. What can you do from now on? First, completely eliminate phrases that label you negatively. Every time you feel the urge to say, "I'm weird, I'm complicated, I'm not okay," stop, breathe, ask yourself, does what I'm about to say reflect love for myself or rejection of myself? If it's the latter, change the phrase, reformulate it. Choose one that expresses your truth without victimization. Because you can be honest without demeaning yourself. You can share your story without using it as a warning. You can be you without excuses. And second, start practicing verbal self-affirmation. Talk about yourself as if you were someone worthy of being known, not someone to be endured. Instead of saying, "I have many flaws," say, "I'm in a process of constant improvement." Instead of "I'm difficult," say, "I have high standards and I'm learning to communicate them better." Instead of "I don't know if I'm what you're looking for," say, "I know who I am and I'm open to meeting someone who values that." This change of language isn't just so women perceive you better. It's so you perceive yourself better. Because when you talk about yourself with respect, your mind starts believing that narrative. And that reflects in your posture, your gaze, your energy. And that energy is what truly seduces. Does this mean you should hide your shadows? Absolutely not. Just don't make them your calling card. Shadows can be shown too, but with light, from a place of maturity, from learning, not from guilt, not from fear of rejection. Because when you no longer reject yourself, others perceive it, and they feel safe near you. The next time you're with a woman and feel the urge to say something like, "I'm a bit weird," change it to something that speaks about your path, your evolution, your vision of yourself. Don't be afraid to show yourself, but do it with dignity, with clarity, with self-love, because the right woman doesn't seek perfection. She seeks truth. And the most seductive truth is that of someone who recognizes and honors themselves, even with their imperfections. So remember, eliminate phrases born from limiting self-labels. Replace them with expressions of awareness. Don't sell yourself as a problem, because you're not one. You are an experience, a living story, a real man. And if you don't see it first, no one else will. Now that you know this, get ready to meet the third forbidden phrase, which, unlike the two before, doesn't sound insecure or self-deprecating. In fact, it sounds like a phrase of confidence. But it actually hides a subtle trap that sabotages your emotional leadership and makes you look like someone who doesn't know what they want. And worst of all, it's one of the most common. You'll be surprised. The third forbidden phrase is perhaps the most dangerous of all because it disguises itself as courtesy, maturity, even emotional intelligence. Unlike the previous ones, this phrase doesn't sound insecure on the surface. In fact, it may give the impression that you're being considerate or leaving space for the other person to decide. But behind that apparent kindness, there's a message revealing indecision, passivity, and lack of emotional leadership. This phrase is, do whatever you want. Yes, that one. Do whatever you want. Said in a neutral tone, said with a smile, said as if it had no weight. But it does, and a lot. Because what you're really saying when you use that phrase is not, "I respect you and trust your judgment," but something much more delicate. I don't want to take a stance. I don't want to decide. I don't want to take responsibility. And that surrender, however small it seems, has an immediate effect on attraction. Think about it. What happens when a woman asks you, "What do you want to eat?" and you answer, "Wherever you want"? What feeling is created? At first, it might seem you're flexible, relaxed, not controlling. But if this answer repeats, if your pattern is to constantly delegate the decision, what she begins to perceive is something very different, that you're avoiding, that you prefer to adapt to everything rather than show your tastes, opinions, your capacity to take direction. And that's where everything wobbles. Mario Alonso Puig has spoken extensively about the power of clarity, not only in thought, but also in action. A clear person inspires security. A person who knows what they want, even if they don't always get it, transmits direction. And direction emotionally generates trust. Because feeling that you're with someone who can make decisions, however simple, activates in the brain a sense of support, of stability, of firmness. That's why when you say, "Do whatever you want," you leave a void. And emotional voids don't generate attraction. They generate doubts. Now then, it's not about imposing. It's not about becoming authoritarian or deciding for both all the time. The problem is not being adaptable. The problem is not showing initiative. Because initiative is a way to show presence. And your presence, when felt from calmness, certainty, openness, becomes magnetic. I'll give you a daily example. You're on a date, walking, and she says, "What do we do now?" And you answer, "I don't know, whatever you want." It may seem a kind answer, but it's actually a wasted opportunity to show direction, to guide the moment. What could you say instead? Something as simple as, "I feel like having a drink. How about we go for a coffee?" Or even, "I have a couple of ideas. Do you want to choose between these two?" There you are proposing, participating, leading the flow of the experience. And that feels different. Mario teaches that many times men fall into this type of responses because they fear seeming invasive or controlling too much. And yes, the intention may be good, but the result is that you end up showing yourself as someone who doesn't want to commit even to their own decisions. And that, emotionally, is demotivating for a woman who seeks someone who can hold a shared space. Let's return to language. Do whatever you want is not just a phrase. It is a surrender. It is a surrender to express your desire, your point of view, your impulse. And without desire, without impulse, there is no emotional tension. There is no spark. There is no rhythm. A relationship without rhythm goes out. And rhythm is marked by the interaction between two wills that express themselves, not one active will, and another that only responds. Another common situation where this phrase appears is on the emotional level. After an argument or when there are differences, many men, instead of expressing what they really feel or think, say something like, "Look, do whatever you want," as if that solved anything. But really, what you are communicating there is passive frustration. You're saying, "I don't want to face this. I'm emotionally withdrawing." And that leaves the other person in a void. It gives them total responsibility to decide the future of the conversation or the relationship. And when a woman perceives that you are not emotionally present, she starts to close off. Mario talks about this as a form of invisible disempowerment. You think you're being tolerant, when in reality you're giving up your place. Because being emotionally present doesn't mean having all the answers. It means daring to be there, even in conflict, even in discomfort. And that is noticeable in how you speak, in how you participate in the conversation, in how you hold your truth without imposing it. So, how do you replace this phrase? The answer is not simply changing words, but changing attitude. If a woman asks your opinion or offers a choice, instead of saying, "Whatever you want," say what you want. That's simple. If you don't have a preference, you can say, "I'm open to what you propose, but if you ask me, this is what I would do." That already makes a difference, because you're not giving up control completely. You're showing willingness, yes, but also presence, also clarity, also interest. Another powerful way to express yourself is, "I'm listening, but I also have this in mind. How about we combine it?" Those kinds of phrases project collaboration, not evasion. They project teamwork building, not silent abandonment. And that emotionally changes the mood of every interaction. I'll share a story about Andres, a private coaching client who came completely frustrated because, according to him, women lost interest quickly. Reviewing his conversation patterns, we discovered his most frequent phrase was, "Whatever you want," on dates, in messages, in simple decisions, in everything. He believed that made him flexible, a good guy, but really it made him invisible. There was nothing to hold his identity. There was no direction. There was no proposal. There was only adaptation. And in that absolute adaptation, he lost his shine. The most transformative thing was when he dared to practice small proposals in his conversations. Choosing the coffee place, suggesting a specific walk, honestly saying, "I prefer this, what do you think?" And the change was radical, not because his ideas were spectacular, but because his energy changed. And women began responding with more enthusiasm, more participation, more connection. Mario explains that leadership is not about dominating. It's about offering a framework. And when you offer a framework with your words, with your direction, with your intention, you're showing that you're capable of sustaining a relationship. You're showing you can make decisions, solve, propose. And that is not only attractive, it's deeply reassuring. The key here is learning to speak from firm yet open intention. It's not black or white. It's not deciding everything or deciding nothing. It's showing that you are present, that you have a desire, a perspective, an energy that wants to actively participate in the connection. And that is seen in what you say, in how you say it, in whether you take the helm, even for a moment, instead of letting everything depend on the other person. So, starting today, replace "do whatever you want" with real proposals, with small decisions, with ideas that come from you. Because it's not about control, it's about not disappearing. And when you stop disappearing, when you occupy your space with respect, clarity, and intention, you become visible. And the visible, the clear, what holds the tracks. Don't underestimate the power of your words. A phrase like this, said over and over, can be the reason a woman disconnects, even if she can't explain it. It can cause that feeling of something's missing, nothing's happening, better to stay alone. Because without emotional direction, desire has nowhere to go. But if you learn to speak from clarity, with sincere proposals, your language becomes an anchor, a structure, a possibility. And that's where the turn happens. When you decide to speak like a man who is present, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally, everything changes. Not because of what you do, but because of what you convey when you speak. Now that you've discovered the 3 forbidden phrases and their powerful replacements, you're ready to understand why they work. Because it's not magic. It's science. It's emotion. It's perception. And that's exactly what we'll address in the next few minutes. You've reached a crucial point. It's no longer just about eliminating harmful phrases or memorizing their replacements. That would be only the surface level. What really matters is understanding why these new ways of speaking work, why they awaken genuine interest, why they open emotional doors, and why they have such a deep impact on attraction. Because it's not about magic formulas or tricks to seduce. It's about something much deeper, the unconscious emotional perception your words provoke. When a woman listens to you speak, she is not interpreting every word with a rational magnifying glass. She's not grammatically evaluating your phrase, nor doing a formal logic analysis. What she does, automatically, instinctively, quickly, is feel. Her emotional system interprets the whole message: tone, expression, body language, rhythm, and of course, the words. And in seconds, she makes an emotional decision. Do I trust this man or not? Am I attracted to him or not? Does he make me feel safe or not? That is invisible dance happening constantly during interaction. And that's what we must learn to read if we want to communicate effectively. Alonso Puig states it strongly. One word can activate a neural network of fear or a neural network of openness. What you say literally can modify the emotional and physiological state of the other person. This is not poetry. It's science. When you speak, your language directly impacts your interlocutor's limbic system, the brain part responsible for emotions. If your words convey doubt, anxiety, need, or guilt, stress-associated networks activate. But if your words convey security, clarity, serenity, networks of trust, curiosity, and connection activate. And in that contrast lies the key to why your previous phrases didn't work and why the new ones do. Take, for example, a phrase replacing sorry to bother you. Simply saying, I thought of you and wanted to say hi. What changes? Everything. It's not just about words. It's about emotional energy and internal position. In the first phrase, you're in a low position, doubting your value, your right to communicate, whether you're welcome. In the second, you're in a neutral but present position. You express yourself freely, don't ask permission, don't excuse yourself, don't seek approval. And that radically changes the emotional experience of the listener, because you're saying without saying it, I'm at peace with myself. I don't need your approval to know I have value. And that is deeply attractive. Now think about what happens physiologically. When someone hears an insecure phrase, their nervous system activates in vigilance mode. It's an unconscious reflex. The person doesn't know if they can relax, if they can give themselves to the experience, if they can trust. But when they hear a clear, firm, confident phrase, their nervous system enters parasympathetic coherence. That is, a state of calm, receptivity, openness. And from there, anything can be built. That's why emotional clarity is not just a communication issue. It's a shared emotional health issue. Another reason these phrases work is because they break predictable patterns. Most people are used to others communicating from insecurity, especially in romance, where there is so much fear of rejection, so much need for validation, so many games of appearances. When you communicate from presence, from honesty without drama, from intention without need, you break that structure. And the unexpected, when authentic, immediately grabs attention. For example, imagine most men who approach a woman do so with calculated phrases, with fake smiles, with obvious strategies. Suddenly you arrive and simply say, Hi, I saw something that made me think of you, and I wanted to share it. You're not trying to impress. You're not begging for attention. You're not throwing out a phrase stolen from TikTok. You're just showing a real inner connection. And that disarms, because there is nothing to defend when there is no attack. And your clear energy, by not pressuring, invites. And what invites generates curiosity. And curiosity, sustained by respect and authenticity, opens the door to connection. Mario talks a lot about coherence. He says, the human mind seeks coherence like the body seeks oxygen. When someone speaks and feels aligned with themselves, that generates spontaneous trust. That coherence isn't just intellectual, it's energetic. You notice it when you talk about what you feel without over-explaining. You notice it when you make a proposal without fear of no. You notice it when you say, this is what I want, without expecting that to define you forever. Coherence is when what you think, feel, and say is on the same channel. And that, although it seems simple, is very rare. That's why when it happens, it has so much impact. The phrases we worked on so far have that structure. They are simple, direct, and come from a more integrated emotional place. You're no longer speaking from lack, but from sufficiency. And that doesn't mean you don't have doubts, fears, or wounds. It means you're no longer defining yourself by them, that you can recognize your shadow without letting it speak for you, that you can express yourself without dragging shame as a backdrop, and that shows in every word you use. Let's go back for a moment to the second forbidden phrase. I'm kind of weird. Why is it so destructive? Because you're telling the other person, prepare for the worst. You're filtering your identity through fear. But when you replace it with something like, I have my quirks and I've learned to love them, everything changes. Why? Because you're expressing the same information, that you're not standard, that you have complexity, but from acceptance. And acceptance is one of the strongest signs of emotional maturity. Whoever accepts themselves doesn't need to hide, doesn't need to defend, and that kind of emotional presence is what truly enchants. The same happens with the third phrase. Do whatever you want. Apparently innocent, but emotionally empty. It's a way of not taking a stance, of not getting involved. And in every human relationship, what is most valued is authentic emotional involvement. When you propose, when you choose, when you commit even to a small decision, you're showing you're there, that you don't run away, that you can hold a desire without fear, and that generates a very deep feeling of emotional stability. Because deep down, what these new phrases are doing isn't just sounding better. It's revealing a more mature, more integrated, more confident version of yourself. You're communicating from a place where you're no longer defensive, nor seeking approval, nor hiding your essence. You're simply being you, but on a higher frequency. And that frequency, my friend, is addictive. Mario says it beautifully. When a person aligns with their inner truth and learns to express it without fear, their very presence transforms the environment, not by what they say, but by what they embody. That's what you're starting to build by changing your language. A new presence, a new energy, a new way of relating to yourself and others. And from there, not only does your love life transform, your entire life transforms. Because these phrases aren't tools to get women. They're tools to reconnect with your personal power, with your emotional truth, with your capacity to inhabit yourself with dignity. And when that happens, the right words come naturally. You don't have to think so much anymore. You don't need formulas, because you speak from the center, not from the mask. When you change your way of speaking, you're changing much more than your manner of expression. You're re-educating your mind. You're redesigning your relationships. You're inviting your environment to respond to you from another place. That's why these phrases work not only because they sound better, but because they have the power to rearrange how you're perceived and also how you perceive yourself. And when that perception changes, everything begins to transform around you. The reason these phrases have so much impact is because they operate on multiple levels. They don't just modify the content of your communication, but also the structure of your thinking, your emotional physiology, and the kind of energy you project in your relationships. This isn't just a word change. It's an emotional statement. It's as if by speaking more clearly, with more intention and acceptance, you're telling the world, I'm ready to stop hiding. And that openness becomes a very powerful signal for people around you. There's an emotional law that operates all the time. People respond to the level you place yourself emotionally. If you present yourself as someone undeserving, you will probably receive little. If you present yourself as someone who doesn't know what they want, you'll be surrounded by uncertainty. But if you present yourself as someone clear, aware, open, and confident, not from ego, but from the center, then those in tune with that energy will naturally feel attracted. Mario Alonso Puig explains it from a neurobiological perspective. He states that our words activate not only emotions in others, but also neural networks associated with social judgment. The human brain constantly seeks signals of competence, security, and empathy in others, even unconsciously. When you use phrases like, "I'm weird," or "do whatever you want," the other person's brain may receive that message as a sign of indecision or instability. But when you speak with emotional firmness, you not only activate trust zones in the other person, but also reinforce your own neuroplasticity toward certainty. This means that every time you choose to speak from a place of clarity, you are retraining your mind to operate on that frequency. You are building stronger, more stable, and more reliable neural pathways. And that is reflected not only in your language, but in your posture, your breathing, your gaze, your energy. Everything begins to align with that new center. And when a woman listens to you, even if she can't exactly describe what changed in you, she feels it. Because true language does not enter through the ears. It enters through the body. And what is felt is remembered. What is felt leaves a mark. These phrases also work because they are consistent with an emotional archetype that deeply resonates in female psychology. The archetype of the present, conscious man who does not need to impress or hide, but simply show up. This kind of man is rare because he is not defined by power or submission, but by authenticity. And that authenticity is the strongest emotional aphrodisiac that exists, because it allows her to relax, to lower her guard, to tune in with you from a place of truth, not from a script. The woman worth pursuing, the one seeking a real emotional connection, is not interested in your perfection. She is interested in your honesty, emotional availability, and ability to hold your truth without disguising it. And your phrases reveal whether you are at that point or not. That is why it is not just about avoiding harmful phrases. It's about speaking as someone who has found themselves and decided to inhabit themselves with dignity. Moreover, these phrases work because they respect a dynamic that Mario Alonso Puig identifies as essential: respect for oneself as a way to generate respect in others. When you speak with respect for what you feel, what you desire, what you think, without crushing the other but without minimizing yourself, you are modeling how you expect to be treated. And that not only inspires respect, but also inspires attraction, because a person who treats themselves well generates a desire to be part of their world, not out of obligation, but out of inspiration. And there is more. These phrases not only improve your romantic relationships, they also improve your relationship with yourself, your environment, your decisions. You start choosing better, setting healthier boundaries, communicating your needs without shame, stopping tolerance of what no longer aligns with you. Because if you can say, "This is what I want," without fear, you can also say, "This I do not accept," firmly. And that combination of openness and boundaries is what defines an emotionally mature person. Mario illustrates this with a metaphor he often uses. Words are like the rudder of a ship. They may seem small, but they steer the entire journey. Every phrase you say marks a direction. Every repeated word becomes a seed. And what you plant with your words, you harvest in the form of experiences, bonds, opportunities, or losses. That is why it is so important to speak consciously, because you are building with your voice. You are designing your path through language. And if you do not choose your words carefully, you will be surrendering that power to your old fears. For example, when you change, do whatever you want to, "This is what I would like. What do you think?" You are making a subtle but powerful act. You are validating your desire while simultaneously opening space for the other's desire. That is not control. That is conscious cooperation. You are saying, "I am here, I have a direction, and I want to build with you, not at your expense." And that kind of communication is rare because it requires emotional presence. But when it appears, it transforms. It makes a woman feel seen, acknowledged, and at the same time, free. Another point we cannot overlook is that these phrases work because they free you from the effort of having to be liked. Because when you speak from your truth, you are no longer guessing what the other person wants to hear. You're no longer editing your authenticity to please. You're showing yourself. And that, paradoxically, is what attracts the most. Because in a world where everyone is pretending something, someone who allows themselves to be is irresistible. This doesn't mean you should speak without filter or consideration. It means you should speak from mature honesty, from a place where what you say does not seek to hurt, but also does not apologize for existing. A place where you can say, "This is who I am," and let those who want to stay, stay. That kind of presence is not built overnight, but it can be trained. And it starts with a phrase, with a choice, with a new way of saying what you've always felt. To close this part, I want you to remember something very simple but powerful. Every phrase you say will be an invitation to one of two things, either to avoidance or to connection, either to confusion or to clarity, either to distance or to encounter. You decide, because you have the power to choose your words. And in that choice, you are also choosing your experience. Mario Alonso Puig reminds us that personal transformation is not a distant goal. It is a series of small decisions repeated every day. And every time you choose a phrase aligned with your truth, you are taking a step toward that man who already lives inside you, waiting to be expressed with a firm voice, a free soul, and a peaceful heart. Speak like that man. Breathe like that man. Walk like that man. Because you already are. You just have to let your language be the bridge, not the obstacle. The biggest mistake many men make in their relationships, and they don't even realize it, is not in what they say openly, but in what they project without saying. Because you can have the best intentions, say well-constructed phrases, memorize every piece of advice in the world, and still, if your nonverbal language, your attitude, or your emotional vibration are transmitting insecurity, fear, lack, or need, the real message the other person receives will be completely different from what you think you're sending. This is one of the most powerful teachings Mario Alonso Puig has shared in his talks. The human being communicates with their whole being. The voice, posture, silence, breathing. Even silence projects something. And that means it's not just about caring what you say, but being aware of who you are when you say it. Because if there's no coherence between your word and your presence, attraction fades. Many men don't understand why a woman distances herself when apparently everything was fine. They believe they were clear, attentive, that they made no mistakes. But they don't realize their attitude transmitted doubt or pressure or excessive expectation, and that on a subconscious level creates tension, making the woman, even if she can't explain exactly what's wrong, feel that something is not right. It's as if something inside her says, "This is not safe. This is not free. This doesn't do me good." And what you project is often not what you want to project. It's what you carry inside unresolved. If you carry guilt, it shows. If you carry shame, it smells. If you carry desperation, even if you try to hide it with a smile, it is perceived. Because we are deeply intuitive beings, and especially women, whose emotional perception is much more developed in reading subtle signals. Notice when something doesn't fit, when the speech doesn't match the energy. That's why more important than saying confident phrases is becoming someone who feels secure being where they are, saying what they say, and feeling what they feel. And that is not achieved with external strategies. It is achieved with inner work, with honesty, with the courage to look inward and ask yourself, what am I really transmitting when I approach someone? Not what you think you're saying, what you're projecting with your tone, your eyes, your deep intention. Mario calls it invisible coherence, the kind that cannot be faked, the kind that is not built by acting, but by integrating. A person who has worked on themselves, who has reconciled with their history, who no longer fights their emotions, project a calm that is irresistible, not because they speak perfectly, but because they have no need to hide. And that lack of need translates into freedom for the other, into oxygen, into possibility. Here's something very important you need to understand if you want to stop sabotaging your relationships. The energy you bring into an interaction already sets the rhythm of the bond, even before speaking. If you enter with anxiety, fear of losing, urgent need for approval, your whole presence is conditioned by that. Even if you don't say it, even if you don't verbalize it, your gaze, your gestures, your tone, your pauses, all scream, "I need something from you to feel good about myself." And that message, though silent, is deafening. A woman who feels emotionally like a source of validation will feel responsible for your well-being. And that burden, even if unspoken, generates rejection. Because healthy relationships are not built from emotional dependence, but from shared freedom. Each person must come from their own center, with their will, yes, with their desire, too, but not with a backpack full of need waiting to be relieved by the other. And here is where most fail without realizing it, because they think what matters is having an entertaining conversation, saying the right phrases, not making mistakes. But the emotional language you project weighs much more than any word. If you speak from the effort to be liked, you are projecting lack. If you speak from the fear of rejection, you are projecting doubt. If you speak from the desire to control the outcome, you are projecting insecurity. And all that shows because you can't hide what hasn't been worked on. One of the most powerful questions you can ask yourself before interacting with a woman is this: am I trying to connect with her, or am I trying to have her fill a void in me? If it's the second, no matter how kind you are entering from an emotional place that creates pressure, and pressure cuts the flow of attraction, because attraction is not forced. It's allowed, it opens, it breathes, and for that, you need to arrive full of yourself, not empty of yourself. Mario explains that unresolved emotional states seep through the cracks of language, and that's why many times we don't understand what went wrong, when in reality it was our energy that failed. What we need to learn is not to speak better, but to be more truthful, because the truth needs no embellishments. It needs no strategies. It just needs space. And when you are at peace with yourself, that space creates itself. There is something few dare to say, but it's essential. A woman doesn't want you perfect. She wants you present. She wants you real, with your story, with your limits, with your desire, sure, but without the anxiety that suffocates. And you won't achieve that by reading more seduction lines, but by recognizing which parts of you still believe they need to try too hard to be loved. Observe your behavior. Are you constantly watching for her reaction? Do you over-explain when she doesn't respond immediately? Do you feel like you have to do everything right for her to stay? Those are indicators that you're projecting need. And need, even if disguised as attention, feels like emotional weight. And what is heavy exhausts. What is free, on the other hand, enchants. One of the best ways to start transforming this is to practice self-observation, not to judge yourself, but to understand your own patterns. Ask yourself, how do I feel before talking to someone I like? What emotions arise? What thoughts repeat? Am I waiting to be approved, or do I simply allow myself to be? Nothing more? Mario teaches that there is no transformation without awareness, and that the first step to change what you project is to make the invisible visible, because what you don't see controls you, but what you see, you can choose to transform. You can train yourself to speak from a more present place. You can learn to listen without waiting for your turn to speak. You can relax within your own experience. And then, yes, your words, your silences, your gestures will begin to flow from a real source. What attracts the most is not perfection. It is emotional serenity, the one that is born when you are no longer at war with yourself, when you no longer need to convince anyone of your worth, because you already recognize it first, when you no longer adapt to fit in, but express yourself to share. And that transformation, I assure you, shows more than any verbal strategy. Transformation begins the moment you stop trying to be someone and simply start being. It seems simple, but it's not, because we've been educated, trained, and conditioned to project an image, to be aware of how we are seen, how we come across, how we are interpreted by others. Since childhood, we are told how to behave to be accepted, and without realizing it, we shape how we talk, look, move, not according to our truth, but according to acceptance. And that disconnection from our center is what ends up projecting again and again as energy of misalignment. And you know what? A woman notices it. She feels it, even if she doesn't analyze it, even if she can't explain it. There is something in her that senses if you're speaking from your essence or from your mask, if you're expressing yourself from desire or from need. And even if she doesn't say it with words, her body responds. She may close off, become defensive, lose interest, not because you are bad, not because you did something unforgivable, but because you're not vibrating in your truth. And that internal misalignment creates an emotional echo that the other interprets as danger or confusion. Alonso Puig emphasizes this a lot. Communication is not what you say, it's what the other perceives from your being. And that means you can be kind, charming, and respectful, and still create distance if your energy is dominated by fear. The fear of not being enough, the fear of rejection, the fear of not being liked. And that fear leaks through, in your tone, in your pauses, in your gaze. That's why beyond what you say, what really matters is from where you say it. Ask yourself this powerful question. Am I showing myself as I am, or am I editing myself to be liked? That question can reveal much more than you imagine, because if you are editing yourself, what you're projecting is doubt, and doubt does not seduce. Doubt wears down. There is nothing more attractive than a person comfortable in their skin, who doesn't try to appear, but allows themselves to be, who can look straight without lowering their gaze, who can say, "This is what I want," without apologizing for wanting. But to get there, you need to work on yourself. Recognize those areas where you still operate from fear, those parts of you that learn not to bother, not to upset, to be the good one, and understand that being good doesn't mean being invisible, that being polite doesn't mean having no limits, that being considerate doesn't mean losing your voice. Because when you silence your truth to avoid conflict, what you project is emotional submission, and that doesn't attract either. That exhausts. That doesn't inspire trust. One of the biggest misunderstandings is thinking that pleasing everyone is a virtue. But pleasing everyone is the quickest way to lose your magnetism, because no one who adapts to everything can be truly memorable. Magnetism is born from authenticity, from particularity, from a unique thing only you can offer, your way of feeling, seeing, being, and that, when genuine, shines with a light that needs no explanation. Now then, how do you start projecting from that place of truth? The answer is not to force anything. It's to begin inhabiting yourself more consciously, to observe your body when you speak. Are you relaxed or tense? Is your breathing flowing or held? Is your gaze direct or evasive? All that communicates, much more than your words. And when you become aware of that subtle language, you can begin to transform it, not from rigidity, but from presence. A simple exercise Mario recommends is this. Before entering an important conversation, take 30 seconds to connect with your body. Feel your feet, your spine, your face. Breathe. Reconnect with your center. From there, what you say will come with different energy. It won't be just a message. It will be an expression of presence. And that is felt. The other notices it and responds from another place too. Another key aspect is the intention with which you communicate, because you can use the most powerful phrases, but if your intention is to convince the other of something, you're projecting pressure, and pressure suffocates. True connection happens when you don't need to convince, only to share. When you speak from the desire to create, not from the urgency to get, and that, once again, relates to your inner world. If you feel incomplete, you'll seek to fill that void in the other person. But if you feel complete, you'll seek to share your fullness. And that's another story, another level. Think about the men you truly admire, not necessarily famous or successful, but those who convey something without speaking much. What do they have in common? Probably an inner calm, a way of being that doesn't need applause, a confidence that doesn't depend on approval. That's what women also look for, even if many times they can't name it. They want to feel they're facing a man who has worked on himself, who doesn't need to disguise, who can hold his truth even in silence. And that is projected with every glance, with every pause, with every no said from peace, with every yes expressed clearly, because your voice not only informs, it affirms who you are. And if you don't affirm your value by how you show up, no one else will. Here's a hard truth. Every time you try to please instead of being real, you betray your magnetism. And when you betray your magnetism, you start projecting an energy that isn't yours. And that shows, because no one can sustain a fake image for long. Sooner or later, disconnection appears in you and in the other. So, what should you project if you want to truly connect? Not an image, not a mask. You should project emotional presence. That you are here with yourself, with what you feel. That you're not seeking to be saved. That you're not acting a role. that you're not waiting to be chosen, that you've already chosen yourself. And now you share that space with whoever also wants to be there from freedom. That energy is impossible to fake, but it can be cultivated. And it starts with small acts of presence, with listening more and speaking less, with observing without judging yourself, with allowing yourself to feel without censorship, with stopping explaining yourself every time you do something for yourself, with respecting yourself in the details. Because what you project when you respect yourself is what generates true respect from the other side. And if what you project is presence, clarity, and self-love, you don't need to say much more, because then your words become an extension of something real, something solid, something alive. And that, dear friend, needs no strategies. It only needs truth. Remember this. If you're not aware of what you project, you'll be trapped in a cycle of constant frustration. You won't understand why what you do doesn't work, why they drift away from you, why nothing lasts. But if you do the inner work, if you clear your intentions, if you heal your insecurities, if you learn to be with yourself, then everything changes, because you change, and your energy changes. And what you project to the world is no longer need, but emotional abundance. And that abundance is exactly what attracts most. Because whoever has inner peace offers something no one can buy or fake. They offer emotional home. And in that home, there is always someone willing to stay. Theory can inspire, but real experience transforms. Because when you see other men with stories like yours who broke their patterns, healed their language, and completely changed how they relate to women and themselves, something inside you lights up, not from external admiration, but from inner certainty. If he could, I can too. This section is dedicated to that, to sharing real cases of men who decided to stop projecting need, insecurity, or fear and started speaking from their truth. Men who went from being ignored to being heard, from being rejected without explanation to creating more authentic and fluid bonds. And the best part, without changing who they were, but how they showed up. Let's start with Diego's case. 37 years old, engineer, divorced. He told me in a session, "I don't know what's wrong, soul. I'm a good guy, stable, mature, but every time I start talking to a woman, I feel like I lose strength, like the conversation deflates, and I don't know how to hold it." When we reviewed his interactions, the pattern became clear. Diego had the habit of asking permission for everything. Literally, every message started with sorry. Every comment followed by, "I don't know if it bothers you that I say this." And when he made a proposal, he hid behind phrases like, "But if you don't want to, it's okay, of course." What he projected wasn't respect, but emotional self-nullification. I asked him to make a simple change. Eliminate all unnecessary apologies and replace justification with clear intention. Instead of apologizing for writing, why not just write because you have something to say, something to share? A few days later, Diego came back and said, "Not only did she respond with more enthusiasm, but I felt different. I felt like I was there as a man, not a child asking permission to speak." That change, minimal in form but profound in substance, was the start of a new version of him. Today, Diego is still the same man in essence, but no longer speaks from doubt. His energy feels firm. His words are an extension of his clarity. And that has made a huge difference in his relationships. Then there's Yvonne's case. A 29-year-old, very charismatic with great humor, but couldn't keep interest beyond the first or second date. He told me frustrated, "I always start well. I make them laugh. They say I'm different, but then they disappear. I don't get what I'm doing wrong." Yvonne had attractive energy, but something in his speech sabotaged him. And it was this. Every time a chance arose to deepen the conversation or show more emotion, he hid behind sarcasm. His favorite phrase was, "I'm kind of damaged, so watch out." And he said it smiling, like a joke. But that phrase carried all the weight of a warning. I showed him what Alonso Puig teaches about emotional coherence. If you say something that seems like humor but actually hides an unresolved insecurity confession, the message received is confusing. And confusion doesn't attract love. Confusion disorients. From there, we worked on how Yvonne could talk about himself without irony, how he could show his humanity without disguising it as a joke. The result was surprising. One of the women he had dated before and who had distanced herself wrote back after reading an honest message where Yvonne said, "Before, I hid behind humor to avoid showing that real connections scare me too. But now I don't want to hide behind that anymore." That phrase, spoken from his heart, opened a new chapter. Today they are together, not because Yvonne became perfect, but because he decided to stop using his fears as a shield and started using his truth as a bridge. Then there is Samuel, 45 years old, entrepreneur, divorced with 2 children. He had no problem attracting women. He had presence, success, emotional intelligence. But his relationships didn't last. Everything goes well until it comes time to make important decisions. That's when conflicts, doubts, and silences begin. What Samuel didn't see was that, in crucial moments, he projected emotional evasion. He didn't say, "Do whatever you want," but his way of responding said it without words. He changed the subject, diluted commitment, made ambiguous proposals. And that created a feeling of emptiness in the women he was with. They felt that, although he was physically present, emotionally never fully committed. I suggested he start speaking in the first person about desire, not fear. That he stop hiding behind phrases like, "whatever is best for you," and start saying things like, "This is what I want to build. Would you like to do it with me?" At first, he resisted. He felt it made him vulnerable. But then he understood something key. Avoiding expressing what you really want doesn't protect you. It sabotages you because it makes you a spectator of your life, not the protagonist. In a conversation with a woman he cared about, for the first time he said clearly, "I want a relationship that has direction. I don't want to run after someone, nor for them to run after me. I want to walk beside." That phrase, said firmly and without expectations, generated a completely different reaction. She told him, "Thank you for speaking from there. It gives me peace to know you know what you want." Today, that woman is building a new relationship with him, but no longer based on silences or evasions, rather on shared clarity. In the end, all these cases have something in common. None of these men changed their personality. What they changed was the energy from which they communicated. And that's all it takes for language to start having a different effect. Because when your words come from a place of presence, acceptance, and truth, the other person feels it. It doesn't matter if you say much or little. What matters is that you are truly there. Language is not just a tool. It is a mirror. It reflects what you think of yourself, what you believe you deserve, what you're willing to hold. And when that mirror shows coherence, self-respect, emotional clarity, then the image the other sees is stable. And stability, combined with authenticity, generates magnetism. Not that artificial magnetism that depends on appearance or spectacle, but the real kind, the one born from being at peace with yourself. And there is also the case of Ruben, a 34-year-old visual artist, extremely sensitive, with a very rich inner world, but who for years had hidden that part of himself for fear of seeming too intense. He told me, "I always felt that if I show what I feel, what really moves me, they would think I'm weird or too involved." So he adopted a distant, almost indifferent style. He never texted first, showed no emotion, talked about everything except what really mattered to him. And he didn't understand why women disconnected so quickly. When he began practicing the conscious language we teach, I asked him to ask himself only one question before answering. Does what I am about to say represent me? If the answer was yes, he could say it. If no, he had to reformulate it until finding something that spoke from his center. The first change was immediate. He stopped pretending not to care. He started saying things like, "What you said touched me deeply. Thank you for sharing it." Or, "When you speak to me like that, I want to keep getting to know you." And do you know what happened? The women didn't pull away. They stayed. They opened up more because they found in him something rare. A man who feels and is not afraid to express it with beauty and presence. Ruben understood he didn't need to disguise his depth, that being emotionally expressive is not weakness, but a way of being alive. And when that expression comes from balance and not anxiety, it doesn't overwhelm, it enchants. Let's continue with Mauricio's case. 31, lawyer, outgoing, great at starting conversations, but with a persistent difficulty sustaining them when the tone began to turn emotional or more intimate. In his own words, I can talk about anything, but when a woman tells me something deep or vulnerable, I don't know what to answer. I freeze or minimize it. Later I realize it was horrible, but it's too late. Mauricio was neither indifferent nor insensitive. Quite the opposite. What happened was that, as soon as the conversation got emotional, he felt afraid of not being enough. His automatic response was to close off, dodge, switch to rationality or humor. What he projected, even if unintentionally, was coldness, emotional distance, lack of empathy. I showed him a simple but powerful idea from Mario Alonso Puig. Vulnerability is not answered with arguments. It is accompanied by presence. You don't have to give the perfect answer. You don't have to fix anything. Just be there, and be truly there. From the body, from silence, from listening. Sometimes a simple "I understand you" with a steady look says more than 1,000 explanations. Mauricio began practicing this in his conversations. Instead of trying to answer well, he chose to be present without pressure. When a woman told him about a difficult experience from her past, he simply said, "Thank you for trusting me with that. I'm here, and I want to know you also from there." She got emotional, because for the first time, someone didn't try to fix her, change the subject, or use it as an excuse to seduce her. He just listened with an open heart, and that, in this world, is a revolutionary act. Today, Mauricio is not afraid of emotions, because he understood he doesn't need to control or solve them. He just needs to respect them, accompany them, and keep being himself inside that shared emotional space. Now his relationships have a different depth, a different calm, a different truth. Then came Andres, a 36-year-old doctor with a different story. Attractive, successful, intelligent, but paralyzed by fear to show vulnerability. His most repeated phrase was, "I don't like talking about myself. I prefer to listen." And although that sounds generous, it was actually a protection mechanism. Andres had learned to avoid his emotions, repress them, not bother others with what he felt. When a woman met him, she found him charming, but soon she said the same thing. "I feel like I can't read you. I don't know who you really are." What he projected was mystery, yes, but also disconnection. A soft, elegant, polite disconnection, but disconnection nonetheless. I proposed a simple exercise. Each time he had an important conversation, he should share at least one real emotion he felt at that moment. Something small but authentic. It could be, "I feel a little nervous talking about this," or "This reminds me of something very beautiful from my childhood," or even "This talk is making me think about things I had forgotten." Andres resisted, not because he didn't want to change, but because he feared losing control of his image. But in the end, he did it. He began to show himself in layers. Not all at once, but one by one. And something changed, not only in how women perceive him, but in how he felt when speaking. For the first time, I feel I have permission to exist fully. With my strength, yes, but also with my doubts. That was the breaking point. Today, his way of connecting no longer depends on doing everything right, but on being himself without masks, without unnecessary defenses, without hiding emotion behind the role of a successful professional. And if there is something we can learn from all these men, it is that emotional language transforms relationships only when it arises from a real internal change. It's not enough to say the right phrase. The phrase must align with an authentic intention, with a mature emotional energy, with a deep awareness of who you are, what you want, and what you're willing to hold. One of the testimonies that impacted me most was that of Elias, a 27-year-old musician with impressive sensitivity, but self-esteem broken by years of rejection and misunderstanding. His big problem was not talking, but being silent at key moments. When he felt something strong for someone, he repressed it, out of fear of scaring, seeming intense, or being judged as too emotional. He confessed to me, "There are women who don't know I love them silently, because I never dared to say what I felt." Elias believed protecting his emotion was the way to not suffer more, but that protection was actually a prison. And every word he didn't say became a weight on his soul. We worked together for weeks until the moment came. He wrote to me, "I'm going to do it. I'm going to tell her how I feel. Not so she chooses me, but because I don't want to stay silent again. He wrote to a woman with whom he had shared years of silent friendship. He said, I don't expect anything, but I need to be honest. I have felt something deep for you for a long time, and hiding it no longer represents me. Whatever your answer is, I thank you for inspiring me to speak for my truth. She answered him, not with rejection, but with tenderness. She said, thank you for your courage. I didn't know. I can't reciprocate now, but your honesty honors me, and I want you near. What happened after? A real bond was strengthened, not necessarily romantic, but built from truth. Elias stopped burdening himself with unspoken words and began to build relationships from his own voice. That is the true power of healing your language. You regain your voice. You no longer speak to be accepted, nor stay silent to be loved. You speak because you are you, and whatever you say, whether liked or not, will be a legitimate expression of your inner world. And that has a beauty no strategy can surpass. The most revealing thing about all these testimonies is that none of these men needed to be someone else. They only had to remove the filters they had accumulated out of fear, stop speaking as they thought they should, stop projecting the character they believed necessary, and start truly inhabiting themselves, expressing with a voice that does not apologize for existing. And you, who are reading this, hearing these stories, surely feel something similar, a mix of inspiration and confrontation, because deep down, you know that many times you too have silenced what matters, spoken from need or projected insecurity without realizing it. And that's okay. It's part of the process. We didn't come here to judge you. We came to remind you that you can start speaking differently, start being different, start projecting another frequency, a frequency that does not lie, that does not beg, that does not disguise itself, a frequency that speaks from the center, not from lack, from choice, not urgency, from certainty, not fear. And that, dear brother, shows. It breathes, it transmits, and it changes your life. Not because it guarantees immediate results, but because it returns the power you had given to the outside world, the power to communicate as a complete, conscious, and free man, the power to look someone in the eyes and say, this is me, this is what I feel, this is what I want, without dragging shame, without lowering your voice, without fearing silence. Those are the men who leave a mark, those who dare to speak with truth, to be with truth, to love with truth, and you can be one of them. After everything you have learned so far, the forbidden phrases, their replacements, the neuroscience behind language, what you project unknowingly in the transformation testimonies, the most important moment comes to integrate it into your daily life. Because knowing what to say is useless if you don't practice it. Understanding concepts is not enough. You need to turn them into habits, because only what is repeated becomes part of you, and that transformation happens with small, sustained, conscious actions. Integrating these phrases doesn't mean forcing yourself to speak in a certain way as if you were acting a role. On the contrary, it's about developing a new way to express yourself that aligns with who you truly are, but that perhaps you hadn't had the courage or clarity to show. A way of speaking born from your presence, your desire, your awareness. And to achieve this, you need to bring this new energy into your everyday life, into small conversations, text messages, quick calls, shared silences, because that is where the new language is really trained. It all starts with an internal decision. I will not speak from fear again. From the day on, I commit to speaking from self-respect, and that translates into simple gestures. For example, when you're about to send a message, ask yourself, does this message come from need or desire, from anxiety or clear intention, from doubt or presence? This small pause, this moment of awareness, can completely change the content and tone of what you are about to say. Let's use a practical example. You're about to write to a woman you like. You feel the urge to start with something like, "Hi, sorry if I bother you. I just want to say hello." But you stop, you breathe, you remember everything you've learned, and you decide to change it to, "Hi, I thought of you and wanted to write for a bit." That phrase, although it seems similar in form, is completely different in energy. because you're not asking permission. You're not justifying your presence. You're expressing an intention. You're acting from your center. And that, repeated in small daily acts, changes your overall vibration because you start living, not just talking, from greater emotional clarity. Another example, you're meeting someone and feel like saying something like, "Well, I'm complicated. I have my things." You know what that projects. Insecurity, warning, self-sabotage. So stop and instead say, "I've had my processes like everyone and I keep growing every day. I've learned to value who I am." That phrase is just as honest but projects evolution. It doesn't define you as a problem, but as a human being in progress. And that generates attraction, not distance. The challenge isn't memorizing new phrases. The real challenge is re-educating your emotional intention, because words are just vehicles. What really transmits is the emotion that accompanies them. That's why, before integrating anything, you need to reconnect with yourself. Ask questions that open internal space. What am I really feeling right now? Am I expressing what I want or what I think the other wants to hear? Am I speaking to be liked or to be true? One of the most powerful tools for this integration is conscious self-dialogue. Start talking to yourself as if you were already the man you want to be, not from fantasy, but from intention. For example, instead of saying, "I'm a mess with women," change it to, "I'm learning to communicate with more confidence every day." That phrase doesn't deny your process, but it doesn't freeze it in a negative identity either. It gives you movement, possibility, future, and that is also trained with practical affirmations. For example, "I have the right to speak clearly. My presence doesn't need permission. I am a man who expresses himself with firmness and respect. My words come from my truth, not from my fear." Repeat these phrases quietly every morning. Write them down. Read them before a date, an important conversation, or simply to remind yourself who you are choosing to be. Because your external language will never be clearer than your internal language. And if you don't change how you talk to yourself, you won't change how you talk to the world. Another key step to integrate this new language is to review your written language. Because often where we project the most insecurity is in text messages. Read your last 5 important messages. How many start with unnecessary apologies? How many are full of justifications? How many hide what you really want to say? Do the exercise of rewriting them from a place of greater clarity. Not to send them again, but to train yourself in this new way of expressing. Also do the inverse exercise. Reread messages where you felt your communication was clear, direct, powerful. What did you say? How did you say it? What words did you use? What feeling was in you at that moment? Learn from yourself. Take those small victories as anchors. Because if you did it once, you can do it again. You just need to repeat that inner state that allowed you to speak like that. And don't get frustrated if it's hard at first. This is like learning a new emotional language. At first you'll make mistakes, doubt, fall into old patterns. But if you keep practicing, if you repeat the new structures, if you keep observing yourself with compassion, there will come a time when speaking from your center won't be an effort. It will be your natural state. It's also important that you integrate this in everyday situations, not just key moments. Because if you only speak firmly when a lot is at stake, but in daily life you return insecure language, you'll send mixed signals. So train all the time. When you order coffee, when you reply to a work message, when you talk with your friends, use phrases that represent your truth, that don't ask permission to exist, that don't minimize before being heard. And here is a fundamental point. Integration is not about speaking more. It's about speaking better. Sometimes the most powerful phrase is a silence full of presence. Sometimes the most valuable thing is not what you say, but how you hold it. The energy with which you speak is more important than the number of words. So don't feel you must fill every space. Let your calm speak. Let your clarity express itself without rush. Let your simplicity communicate strength. When you get used to this way of communicating, you'll notice it also changes how others respond to you. Conversations will be more honest, reactions more open, connections deeper. Not because you're using a magic formula, but because you've cleared your language of all that emotional garbage that used to pollute it. There is no longer need, urgency, or guilt, only a presence that expresses itself without fear. Mario Alonso Puig summarizes it masterfully. When a person communicates from serenity, the other lowers their guard. Because serenity does not impose, but neither does it hide. Serenity says, I am here. This is what I have to offer. If you value it, let's walk together. If not, I continue my path with respect. And that energy is magnetic, not for what it promises, but for what it transmits. So today I invite you to make a practical decision. Make a list of your most repeated phrases in moments of interaction. Detect which come from insecurity. And next to them, write their conscious replacement, not to memorize like a robot, but to begin to feel how this new you expresses itself. Read them, rehearse them, use them, and then observe. Observe how your energy changes, how your body feels, how life responds to you, because this is not just language. It is deep transformation. It is becoming a man who no longer asks permission to be who he is, who does not need to be perfect to speak truthfully, who does not hide behind excuses, sarcasm, or comfortable silences. It is the beginning of a new way of being in the world, a freer way, clearer, more you. We have reached the end of this journey, and if you have come this far, it is no coincidence. Something inside you is ready. Something in you has already begun to transform. You don't need more proof. You don't need more confirmations. What you need now is to take a step, conscious, real, toward a different way of living your relationships, your words, your energy. Because everything you saw, heard, and felt in this video is not just about phrases. It is about who you decide to be every time you speak. Remember the 3 forbidden phrases. The first, sorry if I bother you, which is not respect, but insecurity disguised. The second, I'm kind of weird, which is not honesty, but self-sabotage with a smile. And the third, do whatever you want, which is not freedom, but silent renunciation of emotional leadership. You replace them with cleaner, clearer, more yours expressions. You started speaking from desire, from choice, from certainty, not from doubt, fear, or need. And that change, though subtle, is monumental, because it changes your vibration, changes your narrative, changes the type of woman attracted to you, not because you say the right thing, but because now you say the true thing. You understood that what projects most is not your clothes, physique, or status. It is your energy, your emotional presence, your ability to hold yourself without justifying, to speak without disguising, to look without lowering your eyes. And that is a skill no one can gift you. Only you can build it. Only you can choose yourself. And best of all, you don't need to be someone else to achieve it. You just need to stop talking like you doubt your worth. You just need to stop hiding your desire behind diplomatic phrases. You just need to reclaim your voice. Maybe at first your tongue will tremble. Maybe some people aren't used to this new version of you. Maybe you feel like you are unlearning a way of being that accompanied you for years. And that's okay. That's how transformation feels, like a leap without a net, but with soul. You don't have to do everything perfectly. You just have to be willing to practice every day, willing to pause before speaking and ask yourself, does what I'm about to say represent me? Does this phrase connect or hide me? Does this come from truth or fear? If you do that, if you really do it, your life will change. Not suddenly, not like in movies, but deeply, steadily, irreversibly. And when you start seeing changes, not only in how they listen to you, but in how they look at you, how they respond, how they feel beside you, you'll understand something powerful. Your presence was already enough. It just needed you to recognize it. So, if this video has touched you, challenged you, stirred things inside you, I ask you something simple. Subscribe to the channel right now. Turn on the bell and share it with that friend who needs to hear this as much as you needed it. Don't do it just for me. Do it for you, for your evolution, for your freedom, for your truth. Here we speak for those who no longer want play to please, for those ready to speak from the soul, for those who know seduction is being, not pretending, that conquest is showing up, not disguising. And before you go, I want you to leave a comment with one word, the word that closes this journey, that summarizes this new stage you are beginning. That word is presence. Leave it in the comments. That way, I'll know you made it to the end, that you didn't just watch the video, but lived it inside. And if you comment presence, you'll know you're ready. And I'll send you a special greeting in the next video, because you're no longer starting from zero. You're starting from a higher place. From you, thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing this path. See you soon.